Hello, everyone, and welcome to this self-care and relaxation workshop. My name is Leo Bell, and I am the well-being lead here at Sutton Uplift, and I'm going to be taking you through this workshop today. Thank you very much for joining us, for joining me whilst I give this talk. So this is part of our series of workshops, talks that we're doing online for our YouTube channel. So hopefully you find this all useful, but we'll go through, we've got introductions and stuff to talk through. But yes, welcome to Self-Care and Relaxation. We're hoping this will take about an hour and a half or so, but let's see how we get on. And also, I also just mentioned this is the full version of the workshop. We're also going to, if you scroll through our YouTube channel, this video will be broken up into little sections as well. So 3 to 7 minute bite-sized chunks, but have a look on the rest of the page for that. So this slide, this workshop is usually done with a group of people online, or we sometimes do these in the community as well, into the Sutton area. We normally say that this workshop would take about 2 hours with a break in the middle, but it won't take that long because there'd be more interaction and engagement and stuff. I'd be asking you questions, and then we'd be discussing points raised by the group, etc., etc. So this stuff isn't really that relevant. There's no need to mute because you're not there. You're not going to be able to ask questions, or you are welcome to write in the comments section, and then we'll periodically check that. I will mention just to have a pen and paper handy because you never know when something interesting is going to come up. But the reality is that you can go back, record, and see, and not go record. Sorry, you can go back and see how you're getting on. If there's stuff that you like, go back, rewatch it, all that kind of jazz. Okay, so the aim of the workshop today, you can see there's 4 main points. So I'm gonna get my highlighter out as I go through this. So we've got the first point we're going to talk about is to understand the elements of well-being. This is something that I've discussed in other workshops as well, so this should be nice and easy. And there will also be individual versions of that if you want to skip this bit. We want to understand what compassion is. We're going to talk about things like how would your best friend talk to you in your situation, that kind of thinking. We've got to recognize the value of self-compassion, so that will build on understanding what compassion is. And we will also talk about relaxation techniques and how to practice them. So although I won't be doing any meditating workshop, or I won't be going through a meditation as it were during this talk, because I'll do them in separate videos, I will talk about all the different techniques that we use here. Okay, so what we would normally do in a group setting is I would ask the room, give me an example of, so introduce you, either ask people to say hello, introduce yourself as how you like to be referred to, and name one thing you like to do to relax and take care of yourself. But since I'm on my own, I'll go. My name is Leo Bell, as you already are aware, and I'm the Wellbeing Lead at Sutton Uplift. And what I do to take care of myself and relax, the 2 big things that I like to do is I like to exercise and I like to have hot baths. Okay, so we're going to be going through a visual aid here. So we're going to talk a little bit more about stress. Let's talk about stress. Stress is the reaction that people have to excessive pressures or demands placed upon them. I've talked about the stress bucket in other videos, and I think that there's a separate talk just speaking specifically about what stress is and the various metaphors we use. But in this case, we've got the bucket here, and it's really nice to have this visual aid. So we're going to pretend, so let's pretend that each of us carries around a stress bucket. Over our day, weeks, months, our bucket fills up with all different types of stress. This can be work stress, this could be relationship stress, it could be health stress, it could be stresses that you put upon yourself, say like have very high standards for yourself kind of thing. And with all of these different stresses going into your bucket, you can imagine that this bucket can fill up pretty fast. Some of us are going to have bigger buckets than others, and some of us, different stresses fill up our bucket quicker than other stresses do. To different people. But at some stage, we all have to allow that stress to flow out of the bucket. This can be done by turning the tap at the bottom. When the tap works, we can think of this as us using effective coping strategies to let the stress go. And when we use less effective coping strategies, our tap isn't able to turn. Sometimes we are so stressed we stop thinking about the ways to make the tap turn at all. And sudden changes can mean that large amounts of stress can flow into your bucket much quicker than usual. And these sort of things can really make your bucket overflow. And this, when your bucket overflows, it can make you experience anger, frustration, worry, fear, anxiety. It can lead you to making snap decisions that you might regret later. It can lead you to saying yes to all requests. You just like, because it's just an easy answer. Like, yes, okay, I'll do it. It can lead you to becoming angry or confrontational. It's you cannot handle how much emotion you have in you. You're not, and this is what you see often with young children who cry out and throw tantrums. A part of that is that yes, children are annoying, but a big part of that is also that the children do not understand how to handle their emotions at this stage. They have much smaller buckets, so it doesn't require a lot of stress. It does just take mummy or daddy or whoever saying no to ice cream for that bucket suddenly to overflow, and then the kid throwing the tantrum because it's not able to communicate, it's not able to handle that level of stress, it doesn't understand what it's supposed to do in order to handle the stress. And then finally, when we're very stressed, we also won't pay attention to any of our physical mental health symptoms. Those things we'll just put them to the side because it's just exhausting carrying this giant bucket around all day anyway. Like it's an effort just to get to the end of the day, let alone worrying about these other things. And we want to stop the bucket from overflowing. We want to think about how to manage the stress that's coming in. So we want to try and minimize the stress coming in, and we also want to be able to have an effective way to let the stress come out. So you can kind of imagine this almost as like, it is literally like a bucket that's getting filled up with water. We want to have not too much water coming in, and when we notice there's too much water in there, we want to have a way of effectively and healthily getting rid of some of that water or stress from our bucket. So how do we stop our bucket from filling up too quickly? And how do we think about ways in which we will empty our bucket? Well, this is where the concept of self-care comes into it, or comes into play. So self-care is an active and it's a powerful choice. It is a decision at the end of the day. You are deciding to do something for you. You are deciding to self-care for yourself. And self-care encourages us to engage in a healthy lifestyle. And it is also highly personal. So what I mean when I say these two, we see these 2 points, what is meant is that, so self-care encourages us to engage in a healthy lifestyle because self-care is encouraging you to look after you. It's encouraging you to take care of yourself. It's encouraging you to notice the aspects of yourself that are not going so well, your physical issues, the mental issues. Let's put it like this: if someone never engages in self-care and they suffer burnout, we would not say that they were living a desperately healthy lifestyle, would we? But this is the opposite of what we're trying to do here. We're trying to make sure our bucket doesn't get too full, make sure we don't put ourselves under too much stress, and sort of treat ourselves with a bit of compassion, a bit of kindness, and accept that we are human. And that's healthy at the end of the day. And it's highly personal self-care. What works for me might not work for you. Um, and that's absolutely fine. We want to, in our well-being team, we talk about things that fit in well with your being, and things that fit well with my being might not fit in well with your being. I, for example, like watching football. That fits in well with my being. But if you hate football, then that obviously would not fit in well with your being. If you prefer RuPaul's Drag Race or something, then watch that if that fits in well with your being, kind of thing. We're not going to tell you to do anything that you don't like. Okay, so we're going to debunk some myths around self-care in this slide. Normally, in these workshops, I would ask the room and then we would debunk myths as a group. But since it is just me, I've got some examples from previous workshops that we're going to go through, and I'm going to read them out, wait a few seconds, and I'll sort of talk through them. So the first one I have here is self-care is selfish. Now, although the word self is in the word selfish, self-care is not selfish. And the really simple reason why is the concept that we talk about here in Starting Uplift quite often is you cannot pour from an empty cup. If you are completely burning yourself out, or you are just pushing yourself to the point of that of exhaustion and you are not looking after yourself, you do not engage in self-care, then eventually you will just shut down and you are not going to be useful anymore. And so, I mean, you can almost view this as sleep. Let's say you were working, let's say you were out somewhere at a humanitarian event or something, you're helping, let's say you're volunteering, helping the homeless. Now, you could make the argument that every time that I'm not working, I'm being selfish because when I'm working, I'm helping people. So as a virtue of that, by not working, when I'm not working, I'm being selfish because I'm taking away this time that I'm devoting to other people. But at the end of the day, after a certain amount of time, you're going to need to sleep. So let's say that you work 20-hour days and you sleep 4 hours a week and you do 4 hours a night and you do that for a week. You probably can't keep that up for very long. And after a week, you're going to have a whole week off. So that 1 week, yep, you did loads of work. You did whatever, you did 100 hours, 140 hours in a week, and then you blew up for the next 3 weeks and you weren't able to do anything. But let's say now, let's go back and let's say instead of working 20 hours, you work 5 hours, okay? And then the other 5 hours, and then the other 15 hours of the day, the other 19 hours of the day, you self-cared. Now, over a month, you're going to end up doing much more. You're going to end up putting in much more than 100 hours. You'd end up doing 5 times 30. You'd end up doing over 150 hours in a month. So you see that it's not a race. I like to think about energy levels as being like your mobile phone. You want to try and keep it between 80 and 20% realistically, or even 70 and 40 would probably be even better. So self-care is not selfish. Second point I have here. Self-care means a face mask and a bubble bath. And I don't mean face mask in the world that COVID has brought about. I mean face mask in the sort of cleansing, exfoliating sense, and a bubble bath. So this sort of stuff, these sort of pampering things, the face masks, the hot bath, as I already mentioned, it's the hot baths, the things that I like to do, in bubble baths. And these can be part of self-care, but it is very individual. Not everyone likes a bubble bath. Some may prefer a quick shower. Some may prefer doing a jigsaw puzzle. Some may prefer going for a walk. It might be in nature, might be with a dog, might be anywhere. Sometimes even just doing nothing for a few minutes can feel very refreshing. Self-care essentially helps to build a balanced life, and that's a key word here, it's balanced. And that's one of the reasons that the stress bucket is such a good metaphor. You're trying to keep a certain level of stress going. You don't want no stress, but you also don't want too much stress. And final statement I have here, self-care is a waste of time in a busy day. This again kind of goes back to the point I was making with the first point, and the self-care is of being selfish, that myth. Self-care is important. It increases productivity. It prevents us from burning out. It's kind of, you can't keep going. You can't keep working non-stop. There is a time limit. There is an effort limit that we all have, and we have to make sure that we stay within our range. It ultimately helps you keep going for longer. You wouldn't be able to sprint. You wouldn't be able to run a marathon the same as you would over 100 meters. You have to slow yourself down. You have to pace yourself. You might have drink breaks. You might have food breaks in there. And especially if you're still building up to it. So it's all about establishing how much stress can I have in my bucket at any one time, and keep everything kind of going on a nice smooth level, because stress is inevitable. There's nothing I'm going to be able to say here that's going to be able to stop you from feeling stressed completely, but we can manage how much water is going in and then how effectively we get the water out of our stress bucket. Okay, so we've got the 5 areas of self-care that we're going to sort of discuss now, and it is very helpful for us to kind of break down the idea of self-care into different areas. So we've got physical, social, mental, emotional, and spiritual. Talking about these 5 areas, it's useful because it helps us to understand what areas we might have forgotten about or neglected in our own personal lives. It kind of highlights, oh, maybe I'm not doing that so well. So I'm going to go through these step by step. There's 5 of them, and I'll go through them bit by bit. So we've got physical self-care. So physical self-care is one that most people I work with, it makes intuitive sense. People get it. Essentially, it's so physical self-care is taking care of your body. and it's what a lot of self-care concepts are based upon. Self-care for the body includes those activities that your GP would normally recommend to you. So nourishing your body with good food, drinking enough water, exercising regularly as often as possible. If there was one thing, there's more and more studies now that show that if you can increase your activity level from, let's say you don't have much activity and you can go up to walking 3 times a week for half an hour or so at a time, maybe half an hour to an hour, that's going to have more of an impact on your general health and general well-being than anything that anyone's going to suggest. That is without a doubt the most important, getting in some exercise. Managing our stress levels and getting enough sleep. These are all things that we would consider to be physical self-care. So next we've got psychological self-care. This one can get a little. This is now we're starting to get into the little bit of the woods, as it were. So when I'm talking about psychological self-care, we're talking about mental. So mental self-care, taking care of the mind is just as important as taking care of the body. Even if the recommended activities for psychological self-care can vary between individuals, it definitely does vary. Just like it does with the physical stuff. It may require learning how to manage negative self-talk and addressing the emotions and psychological triggers that can lead to challenging feelings in relationships. So in terms of managing self-talk, it could be doing journaling to highlight this negative self-talk, especially if a client is, or if like someone is unaware of how negative their self-talk is. Another example could be meditation. Meditation is great for helping with negative self-talk because it increases your ability to focus. When it comes to addressing emotions or psychological triggers that can lead to challenging feelings in relationships, it's about journaling. It's about being mindful. It's about trying to look at why I'm feeling this way. It's having that reflection. Psychological mental self-care can also include developing healthy habits around time management, so organizing ourselves, so being able to structure your day so that it reduces the level of uncertainty, creating to-do lists, maybe creating an easy win to start the day, so making your bed, as I've said in other videos. Also having that focus is enhanced by having this time management and this organization, and like cluttered space, cluttered mind, tidying the room and things can help. And also finally, it's about keeping our minds active and stimulated. So obviously I'm talking about reducing stress here, but you don't want to go so far that you end up having nothing to do, because as COVID and the pandemic and being isolated showed quite a lot, an idle mind is dangerous. An idle mind it's not always a healthy thing. It is good to keep that mind engaged. Almost treat it like a muscle in some senses that you want to work out to keep it nice and healthy and ready to go, as it were. And it can also be things like that. I mean, it could be Sudoku or a crossword or reading a book, a non-fiction or fiction book. Next here, I have emotional self-care. So emotional self-care there is obviously links with mental or psychological self-care, and because there's an overlap between how your psyche is going on and how your emotions are going on. For those who are experiencing a great deal of stress due to whatever's going on in your life, for example, cost of living is something that's definitely adding a lot of stress onto people's lives. Individuals who are suffering with grief or bereavement, these things they're hard, and sometimes you have to take the time. If you are under extreme distress, then you're going to have to try and find the space, find some space to problem solve. And how are we going to, like, what can I do to help me get through this period? Is there anyone that can help me out? What are the pros and cons of the different directions that I can go in, and trying to really come with some sort of structure and plan. When it comes to something like grief or bereavement or breakup example can be thrown into here, it does require time to properly grieve the loss, and this can involve journaling about what's happened and maybe about the difficult feelings. It could also involve talking to someone. It could be talking to a member of your family, talking to a friend, talking to a counselor, or anything like that. Social care. Social self-care. If all a person ever does is work, it is difficult to practice social self-care. Social self-care involves having fun with the people you love and meeting new people in different social settings. It may mean going out for a coffee with a best friend, or planning a fabulous date night or a night out with your friends, or just a meeting with your friends, maybe. It means talking effectively through conflict, addressing the emotional needs of the people you care for, and developing a sense of confidence in social situations. Research shows that socializing helps both develop and maintain positive physical and mental health. And there's a really simple reason for a lot of this, and that is because humans are social creatures. Humans are social creatures. We originate from hunter-gatherer tribes of where they suspect now between 100 to 200 or more people in a tribe at any one time. And this is how we existed. The only reason that humans exist on this planet and have been able to take over the planet in the manner that they have is because we are social creatures and because we cooperate so well. It's because of our language and our ability to communicate with each other, which is why we've managed to sort of do so well as a species. And it's important because you have to imagine that if for the majority of existence of being a human being on this planet, if you were on your own for an extended period of time, that was a really, really bad thing. It meant that you were vulnerable to predators. It meant that it'd be very difficult to you to get to prey. Um, Good luck surviving 100,000 years ago, or even 5,000 years ago, or even 1,000 years ago, completely on your own. It's not something that human beings are supposed to be. We are supposed to exist in these groups, and that's why being in a group, it just feels a little bit safer sometimes. The final thing I have here is spiritual self-care. So even if you don't practice a faith, it is possible to practice spiritual self-care. Spirituality is about both faith and meaning in life. Providing spiritual self-care may mean spending time in prayer or meditation or practicing mindfulness or going for a long walk to contemplate purpose or meaning. Regardless of how you find meaning and purpose in your life, spirituality can build social support and ease psychological and emotional distress. And something that I always like to build on when I add this, when I talk about this, is that things that fill your spirit don't necessarily have to be religion, and they don't necessarily have to be mindfulness. They don't necessarily have to be meditation. It's also things that you're passionate about. So if you have a particular hobby that you are passionate about, then that can be almost a spiritual experience, is getting lost. And it can go as far as something as simple as baking or knitting or painting or crocheting or anything like that. All of these things, they can provide, they fill up the soul, as it were. They have this spiritual almost component where you don't think about anything. It could be dance. You could find it in, I mean, a number of these things, like I know some people that like to do things like karate. That's a hobby for them, and although that's obviously getting the physical side of things, it's probably also helping with the social side of their self-care. But then they're also getting that spiritual sort of feeling from it. It feels well with their being, kind of thing. So you can kind of get creative with these things. I mean, for me personally, going through these things is the physical side of things. I try to exercise as often as I can. I try to do something every day. In terms of spiritual, I would probably say that my thing is painting, and painting is probably my main thing. That this is like something that fulfills me in that sense. Emotional, I'd probably say that I talk to people. I'm very open about how I'm feeling, and something that I always allow emotions to come and go, and I try to reflect on what the emotions I'm having is feeling. And meditation is very good for this as well. When it comes to mental, I read a lot of books. I'm into this well-being space. I'm into the self-improvement space. And finally, social. I try to do stuff with people. And a little cheat code. I am very much an introvert by nature. I don't like to go to big parties or things like that. And if I do go to a big party, I was at a wedding not that long ago, and this is a good example of this. So I went to a wedding, and it definitely ticked my social boxes. I talked to a number of my friends. It was emotionally it was quite emotional. It was lovely. I felt a spiritualness because I felt connected with my peers, and this great sort of all this love that I felt from the day. But then it did fill up my stress bucket. I do find it stressful being around lots of people, and also it was a very long drive. It was 5 hours there, 5 hours back. And so, although I didn't do all that in one day, but My bucket was very filled. So what I did the next day, I didn't do anything. I didn't see anyone. I paid £10 for Now TV for the day, and I just sat around and I just watched TV shows and I watched some sports and I just relaxed and I didn't do anything. And I had a nice simple meal and I read a book before I went to bed, and I had an early night. And this is just, and that's an example of self-care, and that's an example of the individualized self-care for me personally. But I bring this up because many things overlap. So when I exercise, I'm very much getting my physical, but I'm also very much getting my social aspect because I go with friends. So I talked quite a lot on that last slide. So we're gonna talk about some things. So we're gonna talk about some values. So have a look at these values that we have here. So we've got health, fitness, social, loved ones, family, self-development, and work. Now, each things could be like it could be a different order for every single person, but I'm gonna leave this on the slide for a good minute or so, and I'm just gonna say, have a think now, and I'll talk a little bit whilst you're thinking. What is the order? What would you put at the top? What's the most important for you? What's the thing you value most in your life? And then work your way down. And it's important when you think about this, really be honest about it. Like, this is just you at the end of the day. Like, this is tailored for you. And it's important that you think about these kind of things. Like, I mean, for example, like my one, I'd have a couple of quite controversial ones in here. Like, I would probably put self-development right at the top. It probably is the most important thing for me. And then it would probably next would be health and fitness. And then I'd start throwing in the social stuff and the fact like things like family and loved ones. So it's an interesting one that it is almost a selfish thing in some senses that I'm putting self-development and health and fitness above family. But that is my values. My family is very important to me. But at the end of the day, it's maximizing the most out of this life that is the most important for me. And although that is in some ways selfish, it's an element of my self-care. It's the self-awareness that matters here. And the reason that we want to like sort of order this and structure it is we want to think about how much time and energy you're currently devoting to one of these areas. So let's say that I put work at the bottom as it is in this order. That's just an easy one. Now, if I'm putting in all of my time into work, which is something that is very possible. I work in the NHS. I work in mental health in the NHS. So it is very possible for someone like myself to end up devoting all of their time and all of their energy and accumulating all of their stress from this one area. Now, if I am doing that and I don't value it at all, what am I doing? I'm basically there's going to be a misalignment between what I value and what I'm spending my time on, and that's not going to feel good. It's if I start noticing that I'm neglecting something that's really important to me. So say I had health and fitness at the top. If we just use an example in the order that's in here, let's say I had health and fitness at the top and I had work at the bottom, but I spent all of my time working and I don't ever do anything to look after my health and my fitness, then I'm very well might feel stress and I very well might have a low mood because I'm not doing the things that I care about. um, and that is actually the example that's in the notes here, is that we could love health and fitness, but we actually spend a short amount of time on it and we spend all our time and energy on our work. And it's important to have a real think about this, have a real think about, what do I have at number one? Am I having this at number one? Am I having this at number six? If so, why am I spending all my time here? And why am I spending none of my time down here? When these are the things I care about and these are the things I don't care about. Of course I'm not happy. Of course my life isn't going great. I'm not doing the things I want to do. And yeah, okay, so we just have a visual representation of time and energy kind of thing here. So have a look at that list, order it in the structure, order it in however order you want, and then have a think about how much time and energy you're devoted. energy being an important factor here. You don't have to spend 8 hours on your health and fitness like you might have to do 8 hours of work every day, but you could get a lot of energy into that health. Let's say you do an hour of boxercise or something at your local gym. Good luck not putting in a lot of energy in that. And yeah, I mean, I'll move on to the next slide off that. Okay, so one of the first four components that we'll explore is self-awareness. Now, that last slide was also talking about a little bit of self-awareness and just sort of getting you to first start thinking about that order and that energy and time and devotion to different areas. So we have to understand what our feelings and needs are in order to be able to protect them. I'll have a drink and then we'll get into this. Okay, so there's an element of Maslow's hierarchy of needs here, but we all innately understand what our physical needs are. So food, water, shelter, clothing. So you could almost call these human rights in some respect. But often forget that our emotional and psychological needs, so our need to feel understood by those around us, our need to trust others and feel trusted by others, and our need to feel respected by others. So yeah, these are all important as well. So these are our emotional psychological needs. If needs are not consistently being met, they can have a knock-on on your health, not just mental, but also physical. This can also have a knock-on on your relationships, your work, your family life, etc. So a big example I can give is if you don't feel respected by your partner, or that you can trust your partner, your work and your other family relationships are going to get affected. It's just one of those things, and you probably can already imagine how that would work. But for others to understand what your needs are, you have to be aware of what they are first. And it sounds simple, that sentence. I'll read it again, because there is a very important point here. For others to understand what your needs are, you need to be aware of what they are first. And this is so common that I find with people, that so many of us daydream through life, and we haven't stopped and paused and thought about what are my needs. This involves, like all of this, I mean, so this involves recognizing feelings when your needs are being met. So think about times when you feel happy. Think about times when you feel peaceful. Think about times when you feel grateful or content. And then think about times when these needs are not being met. And you can think about the difficult emotions, and lots of different ones. And so all the different difficult emotions that can arise. You might find yourself feeling resentful, for example. Or maybe, I mean, the example might be you're minimizing your own needs, letting someone walk all over you, and then you start to feel resentful both towards the person and towards yourself, and you might not really understand why. Your needs that might not being met in your interpersonal relationship. So I've already sort of mentioned this: unequal relationship with your partner, a family member with too high expectations. It could be something in your work life. You don't feel that you're being respected by your peers or your bosses. You might experience back bullying, or maybe your boundaries or your personal boundaries are being crossed. And notice I use the word personal. It's a personal boundary. It's what you feel is your boundary. You sometimes may not be aware of what your needs are at all times. And it's important. So if you look at the words in yellow on the slide here, like the need to be honest, peace, meaning, need to connect, my own autonomy, your playfulness, these are all, like, have a look at that. Are any of those your needs? And your needs are individual. So, I mean, looking at the list that we've got here, for me, my needs are, I straight off the bat, meaning comes, like, definitely screams out at me. And the next one I'd probably have would be my autonomy and my playfulness, and that in some ways interlinks. It's like I want the autonomy in order to be myself, in order to let my sort of inner child play. Even in these talks that I'm giving, I do have an element of myself. There is an autonomy. I am allowed to sort of do this when I have the free time, and I am I try to be playful with these talks and make them as interesting as and engaging as possible. So there is definitely that element in there. I'm a big one for I like calm. That's something that I really like, and that's something that's really important to me. It's having a calm setting. Like I really like my ocean waves music and my lavender smells and all that kind of thing. So I want to sort of finish up on here. So it's really important to understand that when you're what that saying you need support in an area is not a weakness but a strength. I've talked about this in other talks that there's a great book, The Boy. I should be getting commission off this. The Boy, the Mole, the Fox, and the Horse. And the boy asks the horse, "What's the hardest thing you ever did and done?" And the horse says, "Ask for help." It is not a weakness showing your vulnerability. It is a massive strength. When you see a storm, and the example that I have written here is when you see a storm approaching, do you prepare for it or do you simply ignore it? And the answer, of course, is you prepare for it. And the reason why is when we understand our needs, it helps us to communicate to others when they are not being met. It is important to identify and name your feelings so that we can see what areas in our lives we need to be more assertive in and set personal boundaries. Okay, so setting boundaries, this is always a fun one, especially in these talks. Um, I mean, I'll just ask you, because I would ask the room, but I'm going to ask you, the listener, the viewer, how many of us find it difficult to say no? And the simple answer is a lot of us, even myself. And I'm a professional in this field, and I still find it difficult to say no to people, especially my colleagues or like people that I'm very close to. Setting boundaries is not always easy. However, it does allow you to identify and label your emotions, your needs, and express them in an assertive manner. So we've got the four things. So four basic steps of assertiveness. So we've got observation, so describing the upsetting behavior that you are observing in a neutral way. We have our feelings, so you identify and name the feelings that are rising as a result of what you're observing. We've got our needs, so you're connecting and expressing the feelings to a need. And then finally, you're making a request. It's got to be specific and positive, and is requiring a specific action. So I'm going to give an example, and then I'm going to go through a little bit more detail each thing. So the example that I always like to give, I don't know why this is my favorite example, but this is what I say. Your partner doesn't do the dishes. Now, I always used to do the dishes with my partner in my old flat, but she used to do the cooking, and that was like how it worked. But for me, I always like this example, right? So your partner does not wash the dishes. So let's say, I mean, in an ideal world, you tell them and then they do it. But let's say you've mentioned it to it a couple of times and then they haven't done it either time, and then you let it, you're like, oh, okay, they're going to do it. Let's say Monday, Tuesday, you tell them, they don't do it. And then you're like, oh, I'm not going to tell them Wednesday or Thursday. And then it gets to Friday and the dishes still haven't been done and the sink is full of dishes. Now, let's go through let's go through how you might assertively say, please do the dishes in the setting. Okay, so we've got observation, feelings, needs, and requests. So observation. So you're going to describe the upsetting behavior without any evaluation, criticism, or generalization. Just present it as non-judgmental. No charged language. You don't want it to come across as defensive. So in this case, it's very simple. You have not washed the dishes in since Sunday, and it's now Friday. That's literally it. I've just seen that the dish and the sink is kind of full. We've got 10 dishes in there in the sink, and now we're going to talk about the feeling. So what does that behavior make you feel? So I feel a little bit upset because I asked you twice to do the dishes earlier this week. I asked you on Monday and Tuesday, and it's Friday now, and the dishes still haven't been done, despite the fact I asked you really nicely twice earlier in the week. Now we're going to connect that feeling to a need. So In this case, so the dishes, despite the fact I asked you, I mean, I did ask you on Monday and Tuesday to do the dishes, and it's now Friday and they still haven't done, and the sink's getting really full. And it does upset me a little bit because I asked you, like, if I hadn't have asked you, I'd get it. But I asked you on Monday and Tuesday about this, and it's still, and I let a couple of days go, and I just feel like you don't, like, I just feel like I'm not being listened to, and there's an element of respect there that I would like, if I do ask something more than once, and you've said you'd do it, then I really would like, it would feel nice if that was kind of met, that need of being heard by you was met. And then finally, we're going to add a request. So, um, please could you do the dishes at some point tonight? You don't have to do it right now, but at some point, so that on Saturday I can start with, I can cook us breakfast in the morning and I have all the dishes available, kind of thing. And now this is obviously, this is just an example I've given, but I mean, there is, you can do a lot of things. Let's say that it's something that's not been building up over time. Let's say someone has said something that is maybe triggering, maybe in a moment of madness, your partner has said something quite rude to you. You could observe what they said. Let's say they say something on the lines of, I'm going to try and come up with something PC here. You're an idiot. You're stupid. Like I've heard before, you're a stupid cow. That's like a very old sort of like swear expression. Stupid cow, as it were. So let's go through the four. Okay, and it's your turn now to identify what I'm doing in each bit. You called me a stupid cow. That makes me feel upset, maybe a bit angry, because obviously I'm not a cow, and I'm not stupid. I do this and this, and I just feel like I don't know where that I feel like I'm not being respected when you say that, and that upsets me that you don't respect me. And what I want really is I just want a little bit of space. Just I'm upset. Like that's kind of upset me. I just need a little bit, maybe 10, 15 minutes, just a bit of my space. And then we can talk about why you were upset enough to call me that. And then we could talk about maybe how we can communicate a bit better. So that's just like another quick example. But they always, just something to mention, you always want us to do the request with a please. We're not dictating. That's the difference between assertiveness and aggressive. So we don't want to be passive. We don't want to let the person run all over us. We don't want to be aggressive where we trample over the other person. We want to find that nice space in the middle where we can be assertive. And this is actually something that we cover in a separate video, self-confidence and assertiveness. Remember that we all have a right to set our own personal boundaries. The emphasis here is on personal. What may be okay or reasonable for one person may not be for ourselves. And overall, we should understand that we don't get things right on the first try, and that is okay. You might not get this sort of setting boundaries right first time. It might go wrong. The person might blow up. It is possible, because maybe you haven't talked in this way ever before, and that is coming out of the blue, and the person doesn't understand, like, where has this come from, kind of thing. Keep practicing, and then even if you don't get it right on the first try, that's okay. These are skills. We get better at communicating, just like we get better at everything else. Okay, so we're going to talk. So you see the headline: sleep, diet, and exercise. So as you could probably guess, this slide is very much covering physical self-care, which also forms the basis of well-being. It's the body-mind connection. Everything in research that is coming out just shows how much how strong this relationship is. Sleep, diet, exercise are three areas that people tend to have a complex relationship with, and yet these areas are so important. So diet, we'll go through this bit by bit. So diet, speak to your GP or health visitor or a nutritionist. All of our diets are individual, but I am going to give you some tips that I've picked up in my research. But I'm going to read through the notes first. So the first thing it has here is drink enough water. Many of us interpret thirst as hunger. Another thing we've got written here: try to swap soft drinks or juice for water. And then we've got infusion cold flavor tea bags to add flavor as well to water if that really is an issue for you. It also has, so I'm going to go through some tips that I have related to diet. So first things first is we want to think about how much of an eating window we're eating in. So Intermittent fasting is a phrase that's heard very often. There's a reason it's heard a lot, and it's because it is probably the most effective thing that you can do for your diet right now. Intermittent fasting is eating in a limited window, so we all very much underestimate, sorry, the times at which we eat. So when I'm talking about an eating window, what I mean is the time in which you have your food in the day. So let's say you have your first meal at 8 o'clock in the morning, you have your breakfast, and then you have your last food, you finish your dinner just before 8 o'clock that night. We would say that you've been eating in a 12-hour eating window. And I'm going to say that 12 hours is probably the max eating window that you should have. I personally have between 8 to 10 hours, and the way that I do this is I don't have breakfast. I have my first meal at midday. I'll have a coffee in the morning, a black Americano, because there's no calories in it, so it doesn't break my fast, as it were. Your fast being the time which you don't eat. So I have my first meal at midday, and then I'll have my last meal. I probably would have finished it by 8 o'clock. So that means I have an 8-hour eating window, and then from 8 o'clock that night until midday the following day, I won't eat, which means I have a 16-hour fast. That's a really good way to improve your diet, as long as you make sure you get in all the calories for that day. You want to make sure that you're eating enough. And at the same time, you can drink water whenever you want. When I talk about these eating windows, this is literally just food, things with calories in it. Water is fine. Another thing I'm going to mention is limit sugar. We are only supposed to have 25 grams of sugar per day on an average throughout the week. So it doesn't mean every day it has to be 25, but it means that over a week you shouldn't be having more than, what's 25 times 7? It is 175 grams. That's your max for the week. I've worked with many clients who eat that or double that in a day. And sugar is a nightmare. Reduce it in any way you can, really. And I don't mean reduce it by having a Diet Coke instead of a normal Coke. Those are just as bad. We want to, well, on high levels anyway. Reduce your sweet tooth in any way you can. Drink lots of water, eat in a certain window. The other thing I'll mention is try not to have too many carbs at once. What can happen, and I've got a couple of extra tips as well to follow that up. Try not to have too many carbs in one meal, because what happens if you have a very carb dense meal, your body absorbs it super quickly, and then what happens is that your body craves it back much more. You might have ever, I don't know if you've ever had fast food. So an example I always give to my friends is McDonald's. If I have a McDonald's and McDonald's is all bread, chicken nuggets, burgers, that's all just bread at the end of the day. It's all very carb heavy. I eat it, my body goes, oh, that's yum. I'm going to take all of the calories from this. It sucks up all the calories, it eats it, gobbles it up all really quickly, and then it goes, okay, where's the rest? There's nothing left anymore. And then 2-3 hours later, after having McDonald's, I'm hungry again, despite the fact I've had over half of my calories for the day in one go, in like 10 minutes sitting down and enjoying. And that's because of the carb content. If you'd had something that had more fats and more proteins and was slightly more even, then you would not have that immediate hunger, as it were. Your body would digest it slower, it would absorb it slower. And this is why we talk about glycemic index and that sort of stuff. That's why brown rice is better than white rice, for this example. Another really simple tip that you can do for this that will help with this sort of feeling is having fiber before you eat the rest of your meal. So I will often have broccoli, or we'll go with green beans, runner beans, mange tout, peppercorn, asparagus, anything like that. Anything with fiber, I will have about a handful. Green salad as a starter is a great one. Have that first and then have your meal afterwards, and try to have anything sweet, so anything with sugar, right at the end. And this also applies to things like snacks. Having a chocolate bar for a snack in the middle of the day on its own is going to lead to a big old glucose spike, and that is just going to make you want more snacks throughout the day. Try to have that balance. A really good book on this is The Glucose Revolution, if you're interested to find out more about this sort of stuff. So exercise, I already mentioned this. I think it's probably the most important thing you could do. It doesn't have to be anything strenuous. It could be as simple as going for a short walk, or just even gentle stretching, if that's all that you're able to manage. And it could be gentle stretching while sat in a chair. This is really important. if you could do this for half an hour 3 times a week, it's going to have a drastic impact on your well-being. Finally, sleep. Interestingly, exercise can help us sleep as long as we don't do it too close to bedtime. With sleep, a regular routine and creating a comfortable bedroom environment can also be helpful. If you would like to know more, you should watch our sleep workshop that is on our YouTube channel. It's great, in my opinion anyway. And yes, sleep, you can last longer without water than you can without sleep, just to give you an idea as to how important sleep is. Okay, so now we're going to talk about journaling for well-being. So journaling itself is a very powerful tool. It can help you relieve stress and help yourself set goals. It is normal to feel overwhelmed to do things and to feel like things are getting on top of us. Often just taking a pen to paper and expressing ourselves can help us think more clearly and release some of the tension that we have been bottling up. A great thing about journaling is that it slows down your thoughts. It slows down your thoughts to how fast you can write. So our thoughts can go really, really, really quick. We can because we're just chatting incessantly to ourselves. But with a pencil or pen on a piece of paper, you are forced to think as slowly or as fast as you can write. And we cannot write as fast as we can think. So that's one of the reasons it's so good. Journaling is also a great tool for practicing gratitude. This is especially important in the modern world. We might see other people on social media who seem like they have it together, which is obviously just a snapshot of the best moments in their stressful day, for example. And yet it can make us feel like our own life is lacking. I mean, I know people that will take millions of photos on holiday and then they will put those photos up on their social media platforms for weeks after they've been on the holiday, just to give you an example of this sort of behavior. And then that can make you feel like your life is lacking if you see this person. You're not aware that they haven't been in Portugal, Dubai for the last 3 months. They're actually at home struggling with the cost of living, just like you are back in London. I mean, it's great weather at the moment, but if it's the winter and you're seeing all this stuff, it could make you feel kind of miserable, and it could comparison is the thief of joy. And having a gratitude diary can really help with this sort of thing. It helps you to focus on what is good in your life and being thankful for the things that you have. And this is something that has been shown in studies. Simply writing down 3 things that you are grateful for each day. So the examples that I'll give 3 examples of my own, but I'll read out these ones. The smile my baby gave me this morning, a friend checking in on me, my cup of coffee this morning. So I mean, you get the idea. Like my ones so far would be, I'm grateful that I have a car, so then I was able to drive in today. I am grateful for my friends because like I mentioned in the video, I went to a wedding recently and I had a really good time. And I'm also grateful, and this is going to sound silly, I'm grateful that I can read because I've got a new book and I'm really enjoying it. So maybe I'm grateful for the new book, let's say. I'm grateful for that book and it's really interesting and I'm looking forward to getting stuck into it later on tonight. And so those are my 3. And additionally, on top of writing 3 things you're grateful for each day, you can also write down 1 thing that you are proud of, no matter how small. So something that I am proud of is I am proud of my team. I have a great team, and every day they surprise me with all the great work that they do, and so I'm very much proud of them, and I'm proud to be their manager. Final thing that's written here is finish the day on a positive. What have you been able to do today? So putting that in. So something that I have been able to do today is I have been able to start this recording for this video. Staying mindful. Staying in the here and now. Actually, I'll read the quote because I love this quote. Change what you can, accept what you can't, and be smart enough to know the difference. This is obviously seen in various number of religious texts. It's great. It really does matter. It really is. Stress about the things you control and don't stress about the things that you can't control because it's just wasted energy kind of thing. Staying in the here and now can help us develop inner peace and acceptance of what is. Letting go of who cannot be controlled can be an act of self-care. It is about trusting the process and knowing that difficult situations will pass. And we'll talk about more of that next slide. So let's look at self-acceptance. Self-acceptance can look different for each of us, depending on what we have struggled with and which part of ourselves we'd rather not think about. It can be easier to embrace and be happy with the good, valuable, or positive about yourself. But to really practice self-acceptance, you must also learn to welcome and make friends with the less desirable or the negative parts of yourself. And I like to say this to people when I talk about relationships and like people's partners and stuff. Let's think of it like this. If your partner was perfect, that would be really, really boring. You don't love someone because they're perfect. You don't love someone purely for the things that are positive. You love them for the whole person. You love them for all the things that make them them. You love them for the fact that, I mean, if you've ever seen Good Will Hunting, there's a brilliant scene where Robin Williams' character talks about some of the silly things that his wife used to do. He talks about how his wife would fart in her sleep and it would wake her up, and she used to think it was the dog, and she would snore as well. And these are all sort of little things that, like, on like when you think about it from a distance, you might think that that is a negative thing. Why would I? This is an imperfection. This isn't what you want. But or maybe they get grouchy when they're tired. All of these little things, they add up to a whole person, and you love that person for who they are. You don't want them to be perfect, just like we don't want to be perfect. That would be incredibly boring. We have to learn to embrace the good with the bad, the things that make us exact, because these are the things that make us unique. So it is important to make friends with these negative, less desirable parts of yourself that you feel. So how do we deal with these sort of difficult emotions? How do we deal with this sort of these negative parts of ourselves? So first thing that we have here is we identify and we label the emotion. You say to yourself, this is anger or this is anxiety. You sort of, you note it. You are not your emotions. Emotions, like, you might feel sad, but you are not sad. You are whoever you are. And like all things, this will pass. You have to acknowledge next. So next we acknowledge the impermanence of our emotions. So research shows that the lifespan of an emotion in the brain and body is 90 seconds. It is if we engage with them and we get caught up, then they become challenging. I recently read about a study that said that of our internal thoughts, 80% of our thoughts are negative, and 95% of our emotions are of thoughts are thoughts that we've already had. So if we do the maths, you do 0.95, so 95%, 19 out of 20, times 0.8, so 80% being negative. There's a 75% chance that every thought that you have is a negative thought that you've already had. You're repeating a negative thought 3 out of 4 times. So acknowledging that this is not a permanent thing, this is just a state, and acknowledging that that will pass is really important, and we don't want to get caught up. Next, we want to inquire. So first step, inquire, investigate. What upsets me? How intense is the emotion? Where in the body are you feeling it? So, like, if you're anxious, are you tense in your chest? Are your shoulders high up? Is your posture like you slouching your shoulders? Are you making yourself into a smaller space? Is your breathing shallow? What's your face? Are your eyebrows raised? Are you like crunching up your face? So concentration. You don't want to fall into a thinking trap. Today is going to be terrible, or I am a terrible parent, or because I haven't achieved some stuff today, I will never feel normal. I today, expression like this I always hear is, oh, it's just one of them days. What? No, that doesn't exist. There is no such thing as one of them days. It's just stuff might happen on a day, but it's how you react to it that we want to think about. So why have you been triggered? Why do you feel this way? How am I going to avoid this thinking trap? How am I going to keep my bucket not stop it from overflowing? And finally, we want to let go of the need to control the emotions. We need to be open to the outcome of the emotion and what unfolds. We have to understand that the situation can change. We need to let go of the feeling of the need to be perfect. So not judging the not so desirable thoughts you may have, and accepting yourself for who you are. Just ultimately, you just need to remember that you are doing your best, and that is all that anyone can do. We want to achieve our goals, and it's a marathon, not a sprint. Tony Robbins, I've heard him say, we overestimate what we can do in a year, but we underestimate what we can do in a decade. And I kind of think that this is a lifetime sort of virtue. We don't have, like, you can have individual goals for the year, but I mean, my goal is to be the best Leo that I can be, and that's something. And I have little goals that sort of like add to that, but this is obviously not a sprint for me to do that. This is a lifetime journey. Right, so moderating your media intake. Often we find that we were in a great or even an okay mood, but then you absentmindedly click onto Instagram only to be presented with a woman or a guy with washboard abs. You might see a couple on the beach or people living in a mansion. We've already talked about the people who will take photos, hundreds of photos on holiday, and then post them for months whilst they're back in their cramped studio flat. And within less than 2 minutes of scrolling, your mood has deflated faster than an untied balloon. Things like social media can mislead us into thinking that everyone else is having an easy ride, but what we only see is a snapshot. It rarely shows the full picture. Although admittedly, I must admit, social media is improving in this aspect, it's still very much a showcase. It's very much a pre-selected view into people's worlds. Why are we speaking about this? There is a large amount of negative information online. It can make you feel low, worried, anxious, and without anyone saying a word to you. There was a study done not that long ago, which was essentially a happiness study. And what it was is it had literally tens of thousands of participants. And the way it worked, it was an app. And all it did was it texted people at certain, like basically randomly, and it would ask, what are you doing and how happy are you right now? And they'd sort of track the things that people were doing and how happy it made them. And what they found, the big takeaways, I guess, from the study were really that, firstly, that things that might the same sort of stuff creeps up. Being around nature and being around people you care about, friends or family, is shown to be really good for your mood and really good for your well-being. And that consistently is the thing that people enjoy the most. The thing that made people the least happy was social media, whether it be Instagram, whether it be Facebook, TikTok, anything like that, Twitter. These things did not make us happy, and it was consistently shown that that was one of the things that would be very negative, that people assumed would make them happy. But I digress. There are many things that can happen day to day that we have little control over, which can affect our mood. So we need to observe things that are within our control, for example, our media consumption, and keeping our balance within that. Moderating our media intake is obviously a very good way to do this. So too much media. If you feel you're getting in too much media, you need to ask yourself, is this much media exposure helpful for your well-being? It's not saying that you cannot find good tips online. I mean, for example, this is online, and a lot of the research that I've done is through online and through research articles. But do you need to look at this information every day? Even if it is not related to whatever your specific thing might be, let's say it's parenting. Even if it is it helpful looking at influencers who sell a curated image of this perfect life? So, example, how to be the perfect parent. Let's say your YouTuber is very much focused on that. Too much media can make you feel inadequate about your life and your appearance, and also it's going to lead to fear of missing out and FOMO. And this is going to have an impact because it will exacerbate feelings of either having more fun or living better lives than you. This impacts on your self-esteem, triggers anxiety, and can fuel even greater social media use. So constantly checking for updates. What's going on? What am I missing out on? And this is especially bad when you think about celebrities living yacht lifestyles and things like that. You can't help but compare yourself and feel like you're not getting anywhere in comparison to these things. But again, even in this case, you're only seeing the curated version of the celeb's life. They're going to have a team that take these photos. You're not seeing the darkness of their lives, because that's how we all have that. So some of the benefits of not being on social media too much, and I'm going to include the news in this because the news is quite dark at times, and it's not easy to see all the stuff related to cost of living, and then the various wars going on, the stuff happening in America, and all the tragedies that are happening in Afghanistan and places, and Palestine, for example, at the moment. And so it is important to limit social media and news consumption. But the benefits of limiting all this stuff is it does help you to think about other ways to spend your time. So it helps you to fill in that space that you've been filling up with social media, and all this is doing is it's just picking away at your self-esteem. So you're by finding time to do other things, you're going to be already on the improvement, assuming that it doesn't negatively affect your self-esteem and things that you choose to do instead. And basically, by reducing the time you spent scrolling, it allows you to be more productive, go on hobbies, investigate things, more self-care for the things that work for you. So overcoming barriers, setting yourself a routine. It is important to create a balance between tasks and fun activities. It is obviously important to take care of important tasks such as picking up your child from school or sorting out a bill that's due, but fun activities are just as crucial. As we say here at Stand Uplift all the time, mood follows action. You don't feel good because you're doing things, you don't do things you like because you feel good. You feel good because you do things that you like. Setting yourself a routine can help you feel less overwhelmed whilst ensuring that you're incorporating fun things, whether that is time with a friend or family member, or the example I gave earlier, having some me time, as it were. SMART goals are a good way to help you plan your daily routine into manageable, achievable steps. They help to enhance positive thoughts and feelings. SMART being an acronym, so we've got it seen in the bottom right here: specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, and time-based. Bookending is also a great thing to do for a routine because it sets you have a set routine for the beginning and the end of the day. So a few things, food for thought. Are there any tasks that you've been wanting to complete but haven't been able to? So have a think about that. Think about how could you put it into a structured day whilst also incorporating things that are fun. So the task might be you have to do the dishes. Let's say you really don't want to do the dishes. Maybe you could have on your favorite music whilst you're doing the dishes and then have something fun planned for afterwards as a little reward for yourself. So we now have a break, but that is not going to be necessary in this case. So becoming your own friend. So we're going to dive into this a little bit deeper. So have a little think about sort of the idea, the concept of becoming your own best friend and what that might mean to you. But before we do that, we're going to discuss what compassion is. You'll see how these all interlink. So compassion is defined as a strong feeling of sympathy and sadness for the suffering or bad luck of others and a wish to help them. It is characterized by such things as understanding, warmth, tenderness, and sensitivity. You also see some extra words in here. So, for example, tolerance, concern, humanity. I really like warmth. Very good word for compassion because it does make you feel like if you've ever. I mean, there is a reason that there's an expression given the cold shoulder, as it were. It's like the opposite of that. Think about what you think when you think warmth in that respect. Like when you think of someone, oh, they were very warm. What do you mean? You don't mean they were hot. You mean that they made you feel a certain way. And we can do this with ourselves as well. Compassion involves the awareness and recognition of suffering. So basically, the ability to see suffering and acknowledging it. It involves feeling concern, care, and a connection to the person who is suffering. It also follows this a desire to relieve or transform the suffering that is arising with a willingness to respond. Compassion can be a powerful force, but remember that it is important to take care of yourself first, as you can see in those series of pictures related to the aeroplane. We cannot pour from an empty cup, but is also the expression we use. But it may seem counterintuitive, but why do you think that it's important we um, that we take care of ourselves first? So in this example, why is the lady in image 2 putting the mask on herself first before she ends up putting it on her child? Have a think about that very briefly, and then think about how this might extend into your own life. Let's talk about compassion a little bit more by doing a short exercise. So for this exercise, you'll need a sheet of paper and you'll need to answer the following questions. What do you do when a friend feels bad? Think about the tone, the behavior, and the language. Now think about times when you feel bad about yourself. So think again about the tone, the behavior, and the language that you use. Did you notice a difference between what you did when a friend feels bad and when you feel bad? If so, what do you think changing this could mean for you? So, how do we practice self-compassion and what questions can we ask ourselves? When you are having a difficult time, make a mistake, or notice something you don't like about yourself, you can ask yourself, how can I comfort and care for myself in this moment? We often tend to beat ourselves up, which is pretty much guaranteed to make us feel worse. People tend to say that we are our own harshest critics, and from my experience in this role and in life, there is some truth to that. Changing our reaction can have a profound impact and do a lot for our well-being. You are becoming your own ally instead of your own enemy. Instead of judging and criticizing yourself, try to be more kind and understanding. Whoever said that you were supposed to be perfect? As humans, none of us are perfect, and that is perfectly okay. We tend to hold ourselves to very high standards and often focus on the few negative things rather than looking at all of our positive qualities. Instead, try to be understanding and try to frame mistakes as opportunities to learn and grow. There is no such thing as a loss. There are no losses, there are only lessons. And self-compassion can help us overcome our experiences of shame, insecurity, and confusion. And overall, this helps us to develop a self-acceptance of ourselves, which is immensely important. So this strategy is taken from Vex King. So we want to challenge our limiting beliefs. Our experiences, both during childhood and adulthood, shape how we think about ourselves. Some of these beliefs will have grown out of painful experiences. They are also often subconscious, even though they influence us on a daily basis. Think about the beliefs that are holding you back the most. So have a think about think about some beliefs about yourself and ask yourself some questions. So I'm going to give you an example of one that for me, and then I'm going to have a drink and then we'll go through this. So my example of a limiting belief that I have for myself is that I have a really bad memory. Okay, so I'll use my example and I'll sort of read out what I've got here. So my limiting belief that I have here is a bad memory. So let's go, and hopefully you have one as well. So let's ask ourselves the following question. So first question, why have I held on to this belief for so long? Next question, does it add value to my lived experience? Okay, and finally, what would happen if I didn't believe this? So now it's time to rewrite these painful beliefs. Let them be reminders for growth instead. So an examples that I have here, I'll read out these examples and I might do my own. So example given, I am capable of being loved. So find evidence that supports this belief no matter how small. So example given, I care about others. Ask yourself what you can do to live according to the new belief. How can you behave and communicate, etc. So in my example, I have a bad memory. Why have I held on to this belief for so long? And this is because at school, I always used to feel like I was having to try much harder and revise much harder than other people did. I now realize that this was just people pretending that they weren't working, as it were, but it very, very much internalized that experience for me. Does it add value to my lived experience? Not at all. It doesn't add anything. If anything, it takes away because I don't trust myself in certain things, or I don't think that I can do certain things. So I won't learn certain things. I might not try certain things because I don't feel like I'm intelligent enough to do it. What could possibly happen if I didn't believe this? I would be willing to venture out potentially a bit more and try some things that are really mentally taxing that I don't really know. Like physically, I'm more than confident, but mentally, sometimes I do struggle to make that leap because I don't think I could do it. For example, a real good example is learning a second language, trying to get good at learning. I've always tried to learn Spanish, but that limiting belief has always held me back from really diving in and really giving it my best shot. If it helps you whilst doing this exercise, write down these limiting beliefs on paper and then crumple them up and throw them in the bin as an act of letting go if you're not able to rewrite them in the example that I gave earlier. So to implement your new beliefs, you can set affirmations. So be your own cheerleader. I often say to my clients that if I had a little flag, it would have your name on it and I would be waving it. I am your biggest fan in many ways, but we can be our own biggest fan. And this is important because when you have these negative thoughts and we're trying to reframe them, we're trying to get rid of them, we need to put something else in their space. Like we know that our brain is going to be constantly wearing. It's impossible to have completely empty of thoughts. So we want the thoughts to be more positive. We want I love you rather than I hate you coming into our brain. So as well as trying to reframe negative thoughts, we can also try using positive affirmations. These are simple sentences that instill how we'd like to be. So for example, I'm confident I will get through this. Positive affirmations are a little like weightlifting for the mind. The more you practice them, the stronger they become. A good way to do this is through a concept that an individual called David Goggins talks about, and it's called going in the cookie jar. So what this essentially means is that you reflect back on challenges that you've managed to overcome in the past and then you remember that when you encounter a challenging situation in the present. I made it through that, therefore I can make it through this. So positive affirmations that we have here that I'm going to read out because it's important. I am worthy. I am doing my best. I am brave. I am strong. I got this. I accept myself the way I am. I can achieve my goals. A really nice example of this is there's a professional MMA fighter, UFC fighter called Rose Nanaman. Thug Rose is her nickname. Rose Nanam. I'm not going to be able to get her surname right, so I'm just going to call her Thug Rose. She does this thing where when she's walking into the ring, obviously that's a stage of the fight that you'd be incredibly nervous about, especially when it's for a title fight like she's often in, and she repeats herself out loud, I am the best, and then her coach yells back, you're the best, and she just keeps saying, I am the best, I am the best, I am the best. This positive affirmation, she just keeps repeating it, trying to fill out all of the negative space that she could be going through. She just replaces it, I am the best, I can do this, kind of thinking. Relaxation is a powerful strategy for self-care. Relaxation reduces baseline stress, and it is a helpful tool to use in the heat of the moment as it can then bring us back down to our baseline. Relaxation and really spending time with yourself and on yourself can also increase self-awareness. We learn about ourselves, what we are interested in, and what we are feeling. Importantly, relaxation does not have to be done in a professional context. It can be self-guided, and there are many activities to try. Which brings us on to relaxation techniques. So these are techniques to help when you're overwhelmed, intensely anxious, or dissociated from your environment. And you can see here, practice, 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 practice. These are skills. The more you practice them, the better you get at them. The first time you ever caught a ball or someone threw something at you, you dropped it because you were a toddler, you did not know how to catch yet. Now, if I throw you something, you are more than likely to catch it. You probably don't even have to think about it. And this is the exact same with all this stuff. Breathing techniques. So deep inhale, hold for 3 seconds, and then exhale. Repeat 8 to 10 times. You can think of this. I like to think of this in terms of numbers. So 4, 6, 8, 4, 7, 8. So 4-second inhale, 7-second hold, 8-second exhale, or 4, 4, 4, 4. 4 seconds inhale, 4-second hold, 4-second exhale, 4-second hold, 4-second inhale. That kind of stuff. That's called box breathing. Grounding. So helps us focus in the present moment. This could be grounding. I've talked about this in other videos where you put your hands on your shoulders and you just go 1, 2, 1, 2 whilst you're sat calmly in a chair, or you could do it on your knees, 1, 2, 1 on your thighs if you're on public transport. It could also be the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 game. So 5 things you see, 4 things you hear, 3 things you smell, 2 things you taste, 1 thing that you like about yourself, kind of thing, but being very specific. So I can see the gold handle on the door. I can see the the white flower pot, I can see the Aqua Capitica 1.5 litre bottle, etc., etc. And progressive muscular relaxation. So you go from, say, toes, feet, calf, thigh kind of thing, and you go through them and then you tense them as hard as you can and then you relax them. So I would say, all right, think about your toes. Now flex your toes as hard as you can. Okay, now relax. All right, now think about your feet. Tense them as hard as you can, then relax, and we go toes, foot, calves, thighs, abdomen, chest / arms, neck, jaw, forehead, scalp. But again, practice, practice, practice. And also this is covered in other videos, these sort of techniques. So we're not going to do this in this video. This is in a separate video. So look out for our body scan and guided visualization. This is one of my favorite in our talks. This is one of people's favorite visualization experiments. It's a really, really nice one. I go through it in the Coping with Stress workshop, but it's also found in its own separate video. And the great thing about this is you can do this whenever you want. Draw on this feeling of calmness when your next feeling stress and do it as often as you wish. It should be about 15 or so minutes. Some useful apps and resources. So Stop, Breathe and Think, Headspace, Calm, TED is really good. Selfcompassion.org. They also use stuff like Sleepio if you're having issues with your sleep. But all of these things are really good. Headspace and Calm are ones that I use personally because I'm very much into my meditation, and I think it's one of the most important. If I was to say there's 4 areas of self-care, I'd probably have diet, sleep, exercise, and meditation would probably be my big 4. But I check out these things. The worst thing that will happen is that they're not useful. But it won't be time wasted because you're taking time to try and look after yourself, and that's never wasted time. Asking for support. So if you're struggling, so you've hopefully heard in my other videos about the concept of the backpack, and we've talked about the stress bucket in this. If your stress bucket is constantly too full and there just doesn't seem to be, no matter what you do, it doesn't seem to be getting any emptier, it just seems to be constantly overflowing, it can be really helpful to talk about it. We try to bottle it in and not burden people, but a lot of people will feel exactly the same as you, and nobody wants you. I mean, it sounds horrible, but I mean, there was a fighter recently who said after his fight that one of his friends killed themselves, and he said that I'd rather have you crying on my shoulder for as long as you need than for you to kill yourself. And that is how everybody feels. We don't want you. We want you to reach out. We want you to explain how you're feeling, because when you unpack your backpack in front of someone and you show people how much water is stresses in your bucket, then people want to help. People want to say, oh, well, have you tried this? Maybe try this. People have different experiences. Some things work. Like I've said, self-care is very much individual, and dealing with stress is individual. Maybe you just have not found the person that's as like you to suggest some good ideas. Maybe my suggestions of having a hot bath and exercise don't work for you. Maybe for you it's knitting, but you just haven't asked the person who suggests it yet to you. It also helps when someone has experienced something similar and they sort of enjoy, and it could be the most random it might even be a friend of a friend. It might not be the person that you've opened up to. They might say you're struggling with work, and you tell your person, I've got this boss, he's a nightmare, she's a nightmare, they're always on my case, they're proper micromanaging me, I don't know what to do. And your friend goes, oh, okay. I mean, I've not had that, but I know someone else. I had a girlfriend that went through that. I had a boyfriend that went through that. I had a friend that went through that. And what they did was this. And maybe that's the thing that helps. But you would never have got there if you hadn't have opened up and sort of showed what was in your backpack and sort of shared the stuff that you were going through. And although, yes, you can do assist family and friends is great. We also can help you here at Sutton Uplift. And if you're not from the Sutton area and you're watching this video, you can Google IAPT services near me, and you're going to get something. You're going to get an IAPT, standing improving access to psychological therapies. You will get something near you where you get someone like me, or maybe even better, to help you out with your issues. And you might need one-to-one support. Sutton Uplift can offer that to you, as can most of our IAPT services, but it looks different for each service. So do have a look at the website, give them a call and find out the things that they do and see how they can help you. And they want to help. That's why they're there. That's what they're employed to do. It's what they're paid for. Here we have the service user forum. So if you have used our services in a certain area and you think that you can make our service better, then scan the QR code and you will get an email address. You'll be directed to an email, and you send, and basically it invites you to a workshop that is held the first Tuesday of every month from 3 to 4 p.m. on Teams, and it is an opportunity to tell us how our service is doing and how we are doing as a service. And it's also to give us ideas of what to do in the future. What are we doing that works? Do these videos work? Do they not work? Do you like one-to-one and group workshop stuff? What do you feel is something that we're missing? Should we have a social media specific talk potentially, or something along those lines? Finally, I would ask if there were any questions. You can put questions in the YouTube comment section if you like. You can also call up Sun Uplift or email us. But as there is no one here and it is just me, I'm just going to say thank you for your time and relax. Allow yourself to be a priority. You cannot pour from an empty cup. Do not let your stress bucket get too filled. Do not get disheartened if something doesn't work for you. Everybody's different. None of us are perfect. Something out there will work for you. Something out there will help. Think about what fits in well with your being. Think about what fits in ill with your being. We want to get rid of the things that don't fit well with our being, and we want to concentrate on the things that feel good, help us feel relaxed, and help us imagine it as though you are getting through each day with this backpack on. What do you need to do to make the backpack lighter? What do you need to do to get to bed and not feel shattered just from getting through the day? Experiment, play around, persevere with things that you feel like might work. Go with your gut as well, and ask around. People are here to help. But anyway, thank you for listening, and I look forward to seeing you in the next video.